there Dharma school today? Because Camille Sensei had.
There's 3 people that doesn't know that.
Okay. Layla, Brennan, you want to go to a class? Huh? And Rosalind's here? Oh, okay. I'll ask Camille. Oh, what do you want to do? You were expecting the older children, students, right? What do you want to do?
Susan is our teacher, so yeah, but I'm here. So if you want, we can read stories. Sorry.
Now, why don't you go check it out and tell me how it goes. Then maybe I'll join you next time. Okay. Okay. Well, so slight adjustment. Okay. So if we could join in Gassho. Words, whether read on a page or sounds heard through our ears, are basically interpretations of our thoughts. Protest, for some, suggests being against something. In its original meaning, it is to speak for something of importance. Today, we have gathered to express our compassion and love for that which is holy in life, affirming the wholeness that unites us all. This is the means for bringing about healing and the meaning of spiritual health. The coronavirus epidemic informs us of how closely linked we are on planet Earth. This is the reality of our interdependent existence. In this respect, the notion of building walls of separation are contrary to the truth that we don't and cannot exist alone. Families are naturally meant to be together for the well-being of each other. Throughout history, we have been inspired, guided, comforted by those who have lived a spirituality of love that never dies. May the hard, cold ice of exclusion be melted, transformed by the warm, gentle heart of borderless compassion to become the living waters of inclusion. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Okay, so this is the little thing I shared at the recent vigil that some of us gathered for at the ICE headquarters downtown in the financial district. It was an interfaith gathering to stand in presence or vigil in front of this building that's downtown in the financial district. Maybe now it occurred to me, maybe it is symbolic that it's in the financial district, because all the things that contribute to that separation of ICE is financially, economically motivated. If you look at history, there's always that financial angle that influences people's thoughts, particularly government leaders, looking at to getting advantaged and taking advantage of others. So anyway, that was the reflection I was invited to share at this interfaith ceremony. And I thought that would be the theme for today's reflection, given that we're going to be observing what we call Day of Remembrance later this afternoon at the Kabuki Sundance Theater. And this event has been going on for 40-something years, I guess. and it's to commemorate February 19th. Okay? Well, the younger people, are you aware of what significance February 19th has for people in the Japanese American community? Okay? I'm counting you, Christy. You're a young person to me.
Japanese internment?
Yeah. So that was the date on which the president at the time, in 1941, signed a executive order. You know, this is like the ultimate statement or rule of the president. Executive Order 9066 was signed on, actually it was February 1942, February 19th, 1942, that justified the exclusion of people of Japanese ancestry. And I had always had the assumption that it was just on the West Coast, because that's where the majority of the Japanese population lived. But then I've recently become aware that no, there were people picked up of Japanese ancestry in different places in the United States, including the East Coast. And so all the arguments that, you know, we in the media, the people at the time were subject to, arguing why this is necessary, you know, as a protection, as a means of securing our well-being, ours against theirs, and so against the enemy. And so anyway, this is a tradition that we've been following to commemorate that, to stop and reflect upon, have there been any real changes since that? Well, since 1988, when President Reagan acknowledged the injustice, the unconstitutionality of that decision. So he basically dropped that the principal purposes of the executive order and say, no, that was wrong. We're sorry. And here, take $20,000, get out of the way and be quiet. And so, yeah, that was pretty much how it's been for a while. But then recently, more and more people, whether they were in the camps or not, are beginning to realize that this seems to be happening again. And we can't repeat history. And so this is what kind of led to this Day of Remembrance. It's not to just harp on and cry over the past, but really stop and reflect upon what's going on now. And what are we allowing to reoccur if we're not taking some measure to challenge it, to give another perspective, to break down the barriers, the walls that separate. And that's the nature of what you could call tribal mentality. You know, our tribe is the most special tribe. Our religion is the true religion. You know, our race, and so forth, on and on. You know, human ignorance of the truth, of the fact that no one and no thing exists alone. We are all interdependent. We are all influencing each other constantly. So that's why I mentioned the coronavirus is very informative. It teaches us how we assume there are barriers. But the fact is, no. You know, we're just as subject to any kind of a virus, you know, in the biological sense, but also in the mental, emotional sense. We're subject to viruses of self-preservation. You know, that's why, again, I'm really appreciating the book by Robert Wright, Why Buddhism is True, because he's describing what that whole phenomenon is about human beings kind of have this instinctual thing for what? Procreation, to preserve itself. But that was started in a very tribal culture situation. So there were separations. So you just had your own little world. But now with the global situation, we are all overlapping each other. So there is no sense to keeping that notion of my race my tribe, my religion is the most special. Or more personally, me. I'm the most special existence on this earth. And everything should go according to my wish, which is what the Buddha woke up to. And that's why I don't say why Buddhism is such an important thing to help us challenge or help us to heal that mentality of separation, that mentality of being special individually, as if I have a monopoly on that. The fact is we are absolutely interdependent, interrelated. And that's why even this global crisis, the environmental crisis, is clearly pointing to the fact that Homo sapiens have been programmed to think as if we're an exceptional species and everything should be for our own convenience. And we've, as a result, exploited the natural environment. The consequences becoming more and more apparent of that. So, with that, I'm going to share with some of you who might have been questioning, and I don't know, Peter, have you noticed a little sign on the door as you enter the Hondo? Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what does it say? Just bringing you up to speed, because I've had that up for a few years. Okay. Okay. Do you remember, or Peter, do you notice the little sign I attached to the entrance to the Hondo? Okay. How about Christy?
Is it the one with the shoes?
Yeah. My shoe sign. It says, please remove your shoes when entering and leaving the Hondo. And how is shoes spelled? Oh, S-H-U-S. Okay. And that's why finally I put something under it, that it's not referring to our street shoes, but it's referring to shu as it's used in Japanese. It's the term they use for sect. So we're Jodo Shinshu. And then in Japan there's Zen-shu, Nichiren-shu, Tendai-shu, Shingon-shu. So there's a bunch of shoes in Japan. But that's the Japanese term for shu. And that's part of, again, that mentality of separation, distinguishing, separating. And so I thought that, as far as I appreciate Shinnan's insights, I'm Jodo Shinshu, sure, but I think he's cautioning, or he realized the problems with having that kind of mentality. And that's why he had no intention of establishing a shu, building another shu. He was just a follower of Honen, who was somebody who introduced the Pure Land School of Buddhism to Japan, and they call that Jodo-shu. And that's why when the Honganji got established, they started referring to us as Jodo Shinshu. So Jodo-shu is Pure Land Shu, sect, or tradition or school. And just to distinguish us from them, we became Jodo Shinshu, true sect of Jodo Shinshu. Anyway, you see the pattern, the same mentality. As we institutionalize, we establish an identity, become a particular form, and we defend and preserve that form. Unfortunately, that causes, in my view, us to narrow down our perspective. Whereas for me, Buddhism is the idea of opening, expanding our perspective, or at least being aware of how narrow our perspective is. And you can't realize what this narrow until you have something that's broader. So that's why I like to use the example, a metaphor of the rubber ruler. The rubber ruler, have I mentioned? I don't know if I've ever mentioned the rubber ruler. Okay, well, that's to describe the situation of relative judgment. So some things will expand, some things will narrow according to my own convenience. How we judge each other. Yeah. So the way I look at other people, I kind of shrink it down. Whereas if I look at myself or my friends, I expand it. Give them some, what do you call, benefit of a doubt. Even though if they do some lousy thing to me, or you see them doing some, like look at, well, it's easy to point fingers because that's the rubber ruler. I expand and contract it according to my own convenience. Looking at this unfortunate situation at City Hall, with the Director of Public Works. And it's easy to say, oh, what a crook. Well, can I always assume that I've never done things that you could consider unethical, inappropriate is a nice euphemism. But that's the nature of our finite, limited, fallible nature as Bombu. That's why Shinran, he didn't say, I'm the Buddha. He says, I'm a Bombu. I'm a foolish, ignorant, ordinary being filled with all kinds of issues. So this is the kind of awareness of shu. Yeah, being careful about how we put on or build our own shoes. And then try to, so I have this whole list of things that associate with shu, okay? To help us try to become a little more considerate of others' actions or thoughts or what have you. Say, well, walk a mile in the other person's shoe, right? Isn't there that saying? In other words, you empathize. It's easy for us to say, oh, that person's walking with this funny step or whatever. He's too slow, too fast, and so forth. But we don't know what it's like. When we do our walking meditation, we all kind of move at different paces. Yeah. And some, kind of walk steady. Some maybe stumble along the way. But we're not in that person's shoes, so we can't presume how they should be walking properly if they knew how to be a mindful person. Yeah, mindful person is say, hey, okay, I'm wobbling or whatever, not looking at everybody else's step. And what's the other? Okay. Well, the parable or the story about how shoes were first invented. Well, so there was this king that, was concerned, and this is before shoes, right? So anyway, it's just a story. But so he's looking at the people in his kingdom and he's feeling sorry for them because he sees them walking around, stubbing their toes on the rocks and getting pebbles and so forth. And then he decides, oh, I feel so bad for them. I'm going to cover my entire kingdom with leather. And so he started killing all these cows and animals so that they could put all the leather all over to protect his kingdoms, the people, the subjects. And then someone, advisor, finally said, well, rather than trying to cover all of the ground, why don't you just cut little pieces and wrap them around your subjects' feet? And that's how shoes were invented. No, I don't know. And then there's the idea that if the shoe fits, wear it. If the shoe fits, wear it. Not to say my shoes are the most pretty shoes, the best shoes, the more expensive, the shiniest. But if the shoe fits, wear it. So for me, I would just say, Shinshu works for me. Helps me to move along comfortably as possible. But it's an interesting Hebrew expression. When a shoe is comfortable, we forget about the shoes. When the shoes are comfortable, we forget about the shoes. We just move through life comfortably. Okay? And so this is the idea of having, shoes has their purpose, but if they become a basis of judging, of making separations, distinctions about how shoes should look, how they should be, then we are creating this separation. And then as we begin to appreciate this, this is where I'll close with my another Hawaii story. It's called The First Two Shoe Salesmen to Hawaii. The first two shoe salespeople to Hawaii. Okay, and it goes that there's these two traveling salespersons. And this is, they decided that they'll go try to see if they could sell shoes in Hawaii. And so they took a boat and sailed over to Hawaii, and then they're going around trying to sell, these shoes. And then soon after that, one of the salespersons, sends a cable or telegram back to the home office on the mainland saying, "I'm coming home on the next boat. Nobody here wears shoes, so it's hopeless. I'm leaving Hawaii." Then, a few weeks later, after a while, another cable from the other salesperson comes back to the home office with a whole packet of order forms. And then the note says, "Please fill these orders as soon as you can. Send more orders, send more shoes." Nobody here has shoes. The possibilities are very encouraging. So, feeling, this sense of having a shoe that fits, feeling this sense of that which helps us to move through life is what I see as hearing the Dharma. What we're here to do is to move along together with a sense of connection, a sense of oneness, as we call it. And that's why this sense of being together is a very important message that we could offer to remind us that no one exists alone, that we are all absolutely interdependent, interrelated. And so if it only matters of just showing up at these so-called protests to express that, I think we are contributing to what we might call bringing peace to the world. And by the way, I prefer not to use the expression, which is a nice one, but the idea of making the world a better place. As I see it, it's not so much making the world a better place as much as trying to prevent messing it up. Right? Because there's no pollution. There was no pollution. The world, the nature in its essence is pure. So Pure Land is not some distant billion, trillion miles away in the West, but it is the pure natural state of being that we're all born from and we're all sustained by. But due to our own thoughts, due to our own shoes, we create these separations. We make the distinctions. We create these rubber rulers that stretch and expand and contract according to our own separated, alienated thoughts. But to see that is, I see, the opportunity for awakening to the pure heart, pure mind we call and doctrinally describe as the primal vow, the deepest wish in life, the meaning of metta as an experience, not an expression or a concept, but just an expression of love, loving kindness, metta, as the essence of our being. And so with that, I offer again this quote that's translated from message or essay by the late Reverend Daisho Tana that I've adapted. Our religious life should not take pride in mere philosophy or dogma alone, but should reach into our daily lives and transform our seemingly independent, isolated existence and make it one in the Buddha's great light and compassion, realizing the truth of interdependency, thereby promoting peace, giving comfort, living responsibly, to be able to give thanks for the blessings of being born into human and daily life, to say and live the Nembutsu is our true religious life. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo.